Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Erik Palmer. I'm an associate professor and formerly chair of the communication program at Southern Oregon University. And I'm pleased to be helping out with this interview on behalf of the Ashland Independent Film Festival today. Also pleased to have a couple of guests here to speak to about the film Storm Lake, a documentary about a small town journalism and a small town newspaper in Iowa. So looking forward to hearing more about that. Meanwhile, I'm pleased to welcome our guests here, Beth Levison and Jerry Risius. They are the co-directors, and Beth is the producer and Jerry is the cinematographer for the film. So I'm interested in I'm sorry?
I said thank you.
Oh, yeah, great, thank you. So I'm pleased to have you all here and hope to get us started by learning a little bit more about the journey that y'all went on to come to this topic and come to making this film.
Great. Well, thanks for having us, Erik, and thanks Ashland as well for hosting the film. I'm a local Iowan. I grew up on a small farm, maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours away from Storm Lake. So I left, I guess, Iowa in the mid 80s and have been in New York for the majority of that time, since 90, I guess, about 30 years in New York. But I still am interested in all things Iowa, and also a voracious reader of news and journalism. So when the Pulitzers were announced in the spring of 2017, I was reading them, and as they came out, I saw that the headline for the Pulitzer announcements were "Small North Iowa Newspaper Wins Pulitzer Prize," and I did a double take and tried to look at it again. It was true. It was the Small North Iowa Newspaper. So I immediately started reading up on Art and the Cullens and the Storm Lake Times, and within a week or so, I called him and asked if he'd be okay with me coming out and actually spending an afternoon with him and trying to do a character reel to develop an idea for a film. So he said yes, come on out, as a fellow Iowan, I guess. And I went out for that afternoon, and it was great. I really fell for what they were doing. I could see that the kind of work and the kind of journalism that they were involved in, which was really community journalism, and also like a range that would go up to national level of topics, I think was also really wonderful, and I thought was a great story. And then I spent a couple of months trying to convince Beth to come on, and she did. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, so basically, I'm always having to dispel the rumor, but I was just busy working on some other films, wasn't able to add another to my plate. But really, in the summer of 2018, Jerry reached out to me. He had reached out to me a couple of months earlier, and I wasn't really able to respond. But he said, hey, that journalist I told you about, Art Cullen, he has a piece in the New York Times. Did you happen to see it today? And I read it, and I just thought it was really amazing. It was called "In My Town, We Need Immigrants." I thought he had a point of view that was really interesting and that I hadn't heard in that moment. And so I emailed Jerry back and I said, let's talk. And then very shortly thereafter, we were working really hard to get the movie off the ground.
Nice, thank you. So tell us a little bit more about the timeline of making the film itself. How long were you all working on it? How long were you all in the county? What types of experiences did you have there?
So we after we started fundraising and trying to find sponsors, we did find one, and then we went out in the spring, I guess the late winter, end of March, early April of 2019, which was the Heartland Forum, when you see Art hosting the first Democratic candidate town hall, I guess, candidacy, and from there, I guess in terms of the range of schedules, then we were shooting all the way up until the elections, until November 2020. We really wanted to make sure that we could give the times of years and stamps of time, whether being seasons and being times that we could go back and forth and see what was happening, because it's a farming community, to see what was happening with the farmers, also to see what was happening with the range of stories that they were working on as well. So it was, well over 2 years of production, in post-production, and we started, I guess, early 2020, and then we worked our way into the early part of this year as well.
Yep. About 2.5 years.
Right.
Short. I would call that an accelerated timeline for an independent film.
Right. I guess with the election season, that kind of gave you a nice kind of focus in terms of the timeline.
Gave a framework. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, and I think one of my responses to the film, and first of all, I should fully disclose, I got a pretty good gig here at SOU, but I do lean back sometimes and dream about launching a small town journalism enterprise and kind of doing some of the things that Art and his colleagues are doing there, or some version of that. So that part of the film, really obviously spoke to me, but also in the same frame, one of the things that I don't know, surprised me a little bit, and maybe shouldn't have, is how much of a national kind of profile he's achieved. And I think that's a little bit to do with the kind of eccentricities of the Iowa caucuses and electoral calendar and those kinds of things. But what was your experience of that? Being there when the candidates are there and in the Iowa political scene and all of those kinds of things.
Well, certainly Iowa plays an outsized role in national politics. I think that was one thing that drew us, because Art was going to be on stage with the candidates. So that was a draw, just to see how national politics would play on a very local level, but it also gave us a contrast to show that really what their jobs are as community journalists are to report on whether or not the garbage is being picked up, right? Or whether or not, if the home football team won. So, the ranges I think that we went through with them were extraordinary. And it is a very unique paper and in a very unique state. He also talks about being a purple-ish or bluish, I guess, town in a purple county in a very red district. So, there are a lot of politics at play. We also really did not want to make a film about politics, but certainly politics come in as they're reporting on them. So we wanted to make sure that that the film was about the Cullens' work and their newspaper and the community.
Also in full candor, it worked on a structural level. It allowed us to create timestamps in the film so that viewers could kind of know where we were in time, in a way, through the political calendar. So it served also a structural purpose, but it was also interesting, this meta idea that, I think that when people think about democracy and they think about what makes our democracy tick, I think a lot of people just think, oh, presidential elections, that is the signpost of a functioning democracy, and so, but it's a little bit of a ruse at the same time, because really, local news is such a important piece of a functioning democracy. And so, we were sort of using it on a few different levels. But, I would just say, Jerry's an Iowan, I'm a New Yorker. I'd never been exposed to the Iowa caucuses. I always found them very mysterious, very confusing. And it was so fascinating, and it was so disheartening to be in the newsroom after we had been in the Iowa caucuses in Storm Lake, because we really saw this like neighbor to neighbor activity, this totally constructive conversation, this, one person trying to get like someone else over onto their camp, with a candidate, it's always just been so mysterious. So to see it, up close was so fascinating. And then to just, by 10 o'clock Eastern time, which was 9 o'clock out in Storm Lake, for the national news, for cable news to be already, smashing the process and sort of maligning or slandering or, calling it into question. It just felt so unnecessary. And to think that if I was not in Iowa, I would have thought, as an American watching the national news, oh, those caucuses are just a shit show. So it was really interesting to experience that dichotomy in person, and again, sort of disheartening.
That was the thing that really struck me about the film was, I grew up in Texas, so that's a caucus state, and that was my first vote was in a caucus proceeding in Texas. But I've been in Oregon for a long time. We're a vote by mail state, and so we don't have anything even remotely like that in terms of that kind of interpersonal experience. And when I was watching those scenes in your film, I was like, I've never really seen, or at least don't really remember, how visceral that experience is. And the fact that y'all made it visible in this film, I think, is, it's an accomplishment that there should be more of, I guess. I think we're just all agreeing here about, the importance of what we saw there. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to y'all?
Very much so. I think what Beth said is simply that, people hear about caucuses and, they really don't understand them, and being out in them, we actually have a scene that we didn't even use, which was somebody had voted, I believe, for Biden. Biden was not viable, and there was a long discussion about trying to bring them over into the other camp. So it really is, and Art says, that, at the end of that scene is like, it's too bad that we can't be more patient with democracy, because this is a chance for neighbors to get together and discuss, even if you disagree about things. And I think that was certainly one of the main parts of that scene for us, is to show, democracy in action.
Reaching across the aisle. Yeah.
Literally. Yeah.
So I was also interested, the film is mostly told from kind of the standpoint or the viewpoint of Art and the people that work for him, and his family, which is all awesome. And they're all awesome. And during the course of the film, I was thinking, yeah, but does the town really care about this in the way that Art is framing it? And you did get there. There were a few shots, I think, in the about a little bit more than halfway through the film, where you were talking to readers, and they were kind of holding the papers in their hands and talking about it. But could y'all expand on that a little bit? I mean, what's your understanding of how the community, did they embrace the newspaper as strongly as Art says they do, or they should?
Well, I think Art's actually saying that the whole community doesn't embrace the newspaper as it should. I mean, that's a key piece when he's pulling $7 bills out of a container, right? Like, right. That sort of says something. So it was really interesting. I mean, there were people who were diehards who loved the paper. There were people who didn't read the newspaper because they don't read the news. We did spend an entire day going out and ask people about their news reading habits. Remember that, Jerry, when we were outside the Hy-Vee? So, and then there are people who really disagree with Art deeply, and for whom he's pretty problematic. So there's really a whole range, I think, was our experience. And so there, I guess that's what I would say. I would say there's a whole range.
Yeah, and just to tack onto that, the people who disagree with him are very pro ag business. And so they find him and his Pulitzer to be, potentially disruptive, or, potentially an issue with their business. So there are people who disagree with him because he stands in the way of full profitability. But he's also really protecting the community, I think, more than the bottom line. So people are always going to disagree, I think, on that.
What is y'all's take? And of course, as I, lean back and fantasize about launching the, neighborhood newspaper of my dreams, of course, the business model and the economics are the thing that really kind of informs or disrupts that consideration. What's your take on that angle of this story? I mean, where do you see maybe some hope for the mission that art is trying to pursue, based on your experience and observations in the community?
I have a longer answer. I mean, what's really interesting is when we started filming with art, clearly they were very pro paper product, and they really believe in the paper product, and they have a readership that really relies on that paper product. And, with that scene in the Better Day Cafe, it's pretty clear that they're not necessarily open to other media as open. But with COVID, they really saw an uptick in readership from their digital platform. They really saw success with their email newsletters. Now, Art is really getting approached to have a podcast. And, he's now saying that, in 5 to 10 years, doesn't mean that print will be dead, but it's really important to have a digital product. And then, of course, the challenge of having a digital product is having a good digital product. He has a line that he's repeated a couple of times. What's the line, Jerry, about the $100 website?
When we were in the first newspaper he worked was in Algona. When he talked to the Algona newspaper publisher, he said, "I've got as many readers as I can based on having $100 a month website. So how many people can you reach, and how fast, and how people logging on and off. It's not going to be perfect, or but it is what financially controlled by that as well."
And I think the other thing that they're really aware of, which is kind of amazing, is he's very aware of the stories that are being told and some of the stories that aren't being told. And he says that the next editor of the Storm Lake Times he hopes is a Latin woman, so that they can really be telling more of those. Oh, did I just lose my connection?
We can still hear you, although your screen is paused.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I think you're back in now.
Oh, okay, great.
We're pretty close to time to wrap up. So
Okay.
maybe our closing question would be, what's next for y'all as filmmakers, and is there a chance you might come back to this topic or some variation of this topic in the future?
Me first.
Wait.
Sorry, I got it.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry, I have to come off of mute.
Right.
No, I mean, I'll start, because Beth will be able to expound a lot more, and also onto the impact campaign I think that we're running. But our hopes are that people really look at what their relationship is to their local news source, and what is it that they do? Why do they, is it a community? Is it a large, city newspaper? Are they business owners? Are they, advertising with the local newspaper? But also, not just that, but also, I think, really civic engagement. And it's about, being a member of your community. I think that's one of the bigger things that we really pushed forward with this.
But his question was, where are you off to next? Or what are you doing next as a project?
Well, as a project, I mean, I'm a cinematographer, so I'm working on a variety of projects. One on teenagers and social media, one on unidentified aerial phenomena. Yeah, that's
Those both seem great. Looking forward to that. How about you, Beth? If you wanted to kind of take us out on the last word.
Yeah, so I'm finishing a short film for one of the major streamers, and I'm producing 2 more films for 2022, and looking for more films for 2023 and beyond. I don't know that we would make another film about local news, although if we're approached, we would strongly consider it. I don't know if we're going to seek another one out, but we would definitely consider it. And you know, but this film is going to have a really long life, we hope, through its impact campaign. And I just want to leave it at support your local newspaper. If you run a local business, place ads in your local newspaper. And if you want to learn more, follow us at Storm Lake Movie. At Storm Lake Movie on all platforms.
All righty, that's fantastic. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning, and we will hand this off to the festival and look forward to maybe seeing some more of the film or seeing more of what comes up from y'all in the future.
Yeah, just thank you so much for having us. I had the pleasure of sitting next to Richard many years ago at the Sundance Film Festival. Always wanted to be at Ashland. I'm really thrilled that chance came with Storm Lake. So thank you.